The United States constantly, as the most militarily equipped, as one of the richest countries in the world, with one of the most impressive global influence you could imagine, has, given all I've just said, many times intervened in the world, pursuing its own objectives, and often in an aggressive way. But it never can admit that. The country is bizarre. Britain has a War Department. We don't. We have a Defense Department. Everything that we do as a nation is couched in a language of defense. It's become second nature. The Europeans who came here intruded aggressively against the indigenous population, portrayed itself as defending against the savage attacks of the indigenous people. The aggression was clearly from Europe here, not the other way around. The victims were obvious and intended. But in the mind, in the reconstruction of what was going on, white people were defending themselves against the indigenous people. First time I ever saw it, Deerfield, Massachusetts. Old Deerfield, which is a reconstruction of the colonial time in that part of western Massachusetts. And if you read the little plaques on the reconstructed old colonial houses, they're full of stories of the endangered situation of the colonists because the local people, the Indians as they called them, threatened them. Amazing. Who threatened who? Reminds us, of course, of the tendency of conservatives today to keep referring to invasions of immigrants, those desperately poor families coming from Central America, trying to escape climate disaster, war, repressive governments, economic horrible conditions of poverty, coming across to do what the United States has been telling them about itself, a haven for people, a place to which migrations have come for a long time, a melting pot, bring me your tired and your home. All of that gone, and we're suffering invasions. What an imagery of we must defend ourselves. Wow. And then, of course, the Cold War. We had to defend ourselves against communist Russia. Let me give you a statistic, which I do only because so few people seem to get it. And I'm going to use today, and then we'll reason back. What is the GDP that we refer to often, the gross domestic product? It's a measure of the total output of goods and services in a year in a country. And it's a simple statistic that we collect and we use because it gives you it's just a very rough idea of the size of an economy. Because the total amount of goods and services is a measure of what an economy can do, how many people it's got, what kinds of resources it has access to, and so on. And it's very widely used, and it has been widely used for many, many decades. Okay, here we go. I'm going to compare the GDP of Russia now with the GDP of the United States now, so you understand the relative size. By the way, you can go to Google and look it up yourself. You don't have to rely on me. Most recent number for Russia, about $1.5 trillion. Most recent for the United States, about $21 trillion. Okay? And in the past, the relationship was about the same or more extremely different. In other words, in economic terms, we are talking about a relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union that was a little bit like David and Goliath. The Soviet Union could not, would not be an economic threat to the United States. It's silly. It always was silly. And they weren't much of a military threat either, because when you're that different in your capability of producing, you may make a bomb, you may make a nuclear bomb, but your ability to wage a war and to survive it are slim. This is very important. There is a need to have your feet on the ground when you're going to, but no, we represented to the American people for decades an imminent, powerful, dangerous threat against which we had to defend ourselves. And now we are defending ourselves against the aggressive Chinese, or we're defending ourselves against the aggressive Muslims. I mean, it's extraordinary. The United States has military bases all over the world. Russia doesn't, and China doesn't. They have barely any. I mean, who's defending? Who's aggressing? We all know the truth because it's hardly possible, even with this tendency. But the tendency tells us something. The United States can't quite face what it's doing. It can't quite say what the reality is. That's not a strength, but it is a powerful ideological tool. And the job of the elections is really to refine that tool, to repeat those things, to portray us as endangered. The Seventh Fleet, the United States, is in the China Sea, right there, threatening them. We are threatened by the Chinese. It's repeated in the newspaper every day, and our politicians cannot break from it, cannot give us a chance to say, as we need to, and as I said earlier in this talk, make a decision about whether the relation with China is going to be conflictual or work something out. And let me assure you that the conversations between the United States on the one hand and Russia and China on the other are always going on. They're just not revealed to the public. They are kept secret as long as a newspaper doesn't find out about it, as long as a diplomat doesn't make a slip. But for the public consumption, we present the story of their aggression and our defense. The Afghans aggressed us, and we defended by invading. The Iraqis aggressed against us, and we offended by invading. The Vietnamese, we invaded. But when the Russians invaded Ukraine, it was an unspeakable outrage. We were threatened. You have to really get into this very deeply in order to get caught up. And it's as old as the United States, which is an important reason to question it.